coveted international conference on Ayurveda, Yoga and Vedanta. Hearty welcome to you, sir. I request Dr. Sadashiv Gore to present him the bouquet. Welcome you, sir. Please.
We start now.
Yes, sir.
The friends, after the very elegant inaugural session and very full of wisdom speeches by our dignitaries, including His Excellency the Governor of Karnataka, who was very lively and he was very right to the ground in talking the realities. I am going to talk to you in about 45 minutes on ancient Indian medical heritage, Ayurveda and Yoga. We are talking since morning about Ayurveda, Yoga and Vedanta, all three in one line. It's a very good idea to have all the three together because the roots are in Vedanta, then comes Yoga and Ayurveda. I am a practicing physician in Ayurvedic medicine. I teach and practice Ayurveda for the last 50 years at Banaras Hindu University. Incidentally, this is my 73rd birthday today, which people have noticed from the biodata published in the program book. Friends, as you all know, India has the privilege to have a very rich heritage in all fields of knowledge, particularly the health heritage. If you join Ayurveda and Yoga together, it becomes a full science of healthcare and medicine. Unfortunately, till recently, these branches remained in the background and could not be really given the proper place in the society, in the mainstream of healthcare. Now, with the changing paradigms of the problem of health today all over the world, it is now realized that the modern way of thinking of disease and the care is not enough to take care of the current problems of health. And incidentally, the whole idea is now going behind towards Yoga and Ayurveda for preventing and for promoting health as the priority. Now, priority is not making treatment of disease, priority is more to prevent a disease. If you allow the people to become sick and then try to treat, you'll never succeed. You'll succeed only when you promote the health, prevent the disease, and if there is, by chance, somebody sick, also to treat. This should be the priority of healthcare sector. And this has been realized all over the world. Now, this is why people have started thinking about Ayurveda and Yoga all over the world, not only in India. Probably the wave is more stronger in the West than in our own country. There has been, till recently, a kind of dichotomy between Yoga and Ayurveda. Both streams are running parallel, but now it has been realized that the need of joining both together to make it a complete system of healthcare with bias on the prevention more than the cure alone. Can I have the next slide? Now, for the purpose of those who do not come from the core area of Ayurveda, I just want to take a minute to explain what is Ayurveda. Ayurveda is the oldest system of life science and health care. Its antiquity going back to the Vedas. It is believed to have been the worldview of its time, which subsequently shrank only to India and in unfortunate situations. Now, reglobalizing again, the ancient knowledge base of Ayurveda has survived today in the present times through two sets of ancient classical texts which are popularly known as Brihatrayis and Laghutrayis. 3 big books of Ayurveda and 3 small books of Ayurveda. This is how we call. These 2 sets of books are respected today in the Ayurvedic profession in the same way as the Christians respect the Old Testament Bible and the New Testament Bible. These texts which are unlisted here, you cannot read, unfortunately, because the projection is too small. The first three texts, Charak, Shushan, and Bhagavad, are claimed to be pre-Christian texts, very old. Charak Samhita particularly is very old, and then later books are also fairly old. But the medieval texts like Madhav Nidan, Sarangada Samhita, and Bhava Prakash are the books which were written in the medieval period, and a lot of new information has been added. I'm showing this slide particularly to emphasize that Ayurveda was never static. It was always growing from ancient time to medieval period. Probably if there is something stagnated, was more in the modern times when we were in the British rule. So these are the basic source of knowledge of Ayurvedic knowledge base. Next one. Now, Ayurveda as a system of medicine or health science had its own biology. Every medical science has a biology, and the biology is used in developing disease and treatment. So it has its own biology, which is very different than the modern biology of today. And therefore, for understanding Ayurveda to the core, it is very necessary to understand what is Ayurveda biology. The main themes, which I will not talk in details because there is not so much of time, is starting from the Srishti Krama, is starting from the creation of the universe in the most ancient times, going to the concept of Trigunas, the Tanmantras, Panchamahabhutas, the Doshas, the Dosha Prakritis, the Saptadhatus, Agni, Am, Ojas, and so many things have been described, and the entire body physiology has been described in a very different way than you describe now in modern terms. Therefore, one has to realize that Ayurveda is very different than modern medicine and modern biology. Unless you realize this, probably you will not understand what Ayurveda is talking about. But entire spectrum, if you go to the history of development of knowledge base, it seems that there has been a kind of change of concepts. Starting from philosophy, ideas go to physics. From physics, it goes to biology. From biology, it goes to pathology. And then it goes to medicine. Probably ancient Ayurveda was not medicine. It was something more than that. So from philosophy to physics, physics to biology, biology to pathology, and then to medicine, this has been probably the way of growth of this science from ancient times till today. So knowledge has been changing, evolving, developing, becoming from fundamental to applied. Because Ayurveda, if it is to be practiced as a system of medicine, its applications have to be more easy. Probably the entire process of evolution of knowledge in this field was more to make it more convenient, more easily understandable, more suitable for making diagnosis and treatment of the ailing humanity. This is why the knowledge grew. It is also very important to emphasize that many of these things which Ayurveda talks are really not described in the same way in Vedic literature. Many of these ideas are unique to Ayurvedic Samhitas. For example, the very important theory of Ayurveda, the Dosh theory, is not described so clearly in Vedic text, nor in Upanishads. It is first time described by Charak and later texts who evolved biology of Ayurveda from physics. And the Dosh theory was the first attempt to transforming physics into biology. Because it is also possible to practice medicine by physics, but it becomes more applied, more easy to practice medicine if you understand the biology. And this was the kind of thing that happened from philosophy to physics, physics to biology, biology to pathology, then diagnostics and treatment. This is how knowledge went on growing. So Ayurveda was always a dynamic system of knowledge base, and it was never static. It became static only in the later periods. Next one. Now, these are some important features of Ayurveda which make it distinguished from today's medical practice. Some of the few important things which I will refer here, all my Ayurvedic colleagues understand, Those who are from other areas, for them only it is just a line of advice. The theory of Loka Purusha Shamya. Ayurveda propounds a very strong theory of Loka Purusha Shamya. Here in this context, Loka means the whole globe, the whole universe, whole environment, and Purus is the individual. This Purus is not that Purus which we talk in philosophy. Purus means individual and the environment. Ayurveda says that there is a continuum between the individual and the environment. This is Loka Purusha Shamya theory. Then we have a very strong theory of Samanya and Vishesha. While planning the treatment, Ayurveda believes that anything which is similar in properties will increase the similar. Similar increases the similar. And dissimilar depletes the same. The very simple formula on which we formulate our treatment. So Samanya and Vishesha, homologous and heterologous. This is a very important indication which Charak talks very strongly in the very first chapter of Sutrasthana. There we have theory of Svabhava Parambhada. Charak again emphasizes strongly that there is a theory of Svabhava Parambhada. Cessation of disease, disappearance of disease is the Svabhava. It is not your nature to be sick. Your nature, basic nature is to remain healthy. And even if you become sick due to some reason, your body is already taking care to cure you. It is not always necessary that a doctor should come, examine you, or give medicine, then only you will be cured. So there is a spontaneous healing process, a spontaneous defense mechanism in the body which helps you. So rarely a doctor is needed. A doctor should understand that he is not the curer, he is only the assistant to the nature which is already operating. This is called theory of Svabhava Parambhada. Now this strong theory, which has started in the classic period of Ayurveda, is now scientifically supported, because now modern medicine is saying that we have a strong, powerful defense mechanism which defends us. And probably if our defense is strong, there will be no need of any medicine or any doctor to operate. So this idea, which was so ancient and classical, is proving scientifically even today. And then Ayurveda makes a pro-nature approach to everything. We never act against nature. Modern medicine talks and acts many times against nature. Even our students know that Ayurveda says that if there is somebody who has diarrhea, allow the diarrhea to prevail for 1 or 2 days. Don't stop it immediately, because nature is bringing diarrhea, probably to purify you, and you will be cured. Don't jump on medicine immediately. Similarly, if you have fever, allow the fever to prevail for a day or 2 or 3, and that continued fever will induce immunity in you, and you will never suffer from that disease. So allow the nature to function, and don't interfere into the nature's action which is already taking place in the body. And then holistic approach. Ayurveda is known as holistic medicine, because when we say holistic means, in the morning session everybody said the body, mind, spirit continuum. We are not only a body, we are a body, we have a psyche, we have a spirit, and all three are together. Nothing is separate, nothing is discrete. So it is whole that is to be tackled. Similarly, when we prescribe treatment, we don't prescribe only medicines. We prescribe diet, we prescribe few medicines, and much more than that, we plan the total lifestyle management. So Aushadhi Anna Viharabhyam, this is our sutra of managing. It is holistic, not one thing or two things. So therefore it is a purely holistic, natural system of medicine which is important to emphasize. Then another feature of Ayurveda is it is individualized healthcare. Ayurveda believes that every individual being is unique. No two persons are equal, because each one of us has our own prakriti, which modern medicine has started emphasizing a lot now in terms of genome. Everybody has a separate genome. Even two brothers have not the same genome. Now, if two persons are suffering from same disease, we don't prescribe the same treatment. We give more importance to the individualized constitution of the individual. Maybe the Prakriti demands something, Vikriti demands something. Therefore, it is a highly specialized, individualized system of medicine. And then what more important is that that it is all inclusive. We include everything. Although the Ayurveda also specializes in certain things, but it is all inclusive system of healthcare where everything is taken care. Next one. Now, friends, I just want to take your time. Ayurveda conceives life as a tri-triangular unit. You can see here in this triangle, there are three triangles overlapping each other. The outermost triangle is the ecological triangle, which is governed by the air, water, and fire. Air, water, and fire form the outer triangle of our life process, which is ecological triangle. Then we have biological triangle, which is derivative of the ecological triangle, and that is described as Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. What we call as Vata dosh in our body is nothing but a biological derivative of air factor. Or what we call as Pitta in our body is nothing but a biological derivative of fire. Similarly, what we call as Kapha in our body is a biological derivative of water. So, water, air, fire, then Vata, Pitta, Kapha, from ecology to biology. If you peep into the interior of the individual being, we have also three angles of our subtle body, which is angles of Oja, Teja, and Prana. Well, Oja, Teja, and Prana are the terms which often occur in the Vedic literature. They were probably replacing Vata, Pitta, Kapha in those days. But to make it more gross, more applicable, probably the Tidose theory came into existence. So all the three triangles have to cohere together, are to be taken together. This is the holistic definition of Ayu. Ayurveda is the science of Ayu. And this is Ayu. Ayu is triangular in that sense. And the green circle means it is not triangular, it is becomes circular if whole thing is in coordination. Next one. To make it more clear what I was trying to say, we hear a lot about united field theories of modern physics. Physicists go on talking about the united field theories in terms of physics. Now, if you took this Ayu in Ayurveda, it's supposed to be four-dimensional. Sarirendriya Sattvatma Sanjogo Dhara Jivitam. In the very first chapter of Sutasthana Charak says, Sarirendriya Sattvatma Sanjogo Dhara Jivitam. Now, we have a physical body, then we have a sensorial apparatus, then we have a mind, a psyche, and then we have our consciousness, our Atman. All these fit together is the life. Life is not only body-mind system. Modern medicine considers body, sometimes also the mind, as the life process. But here is Sarirendriya Sattvatma Sanjogo Dhara Jivitam. The body, the senses, the psyche, and the soul all put together. This is the entity of life. Each one of us are four-dimensional. Another thing is that all these four dimensions in a unit, which is called Ayu or life, is not discrete, is not independent. It is linked to superconsciousness, the cosmic consciousness, the cosmos. So each one of us are a continuum with the cosmos. The Atma of each of us is a continuum of the Paramatma, the superconsciousness. This is how Ayurveda talks about life process, which is in tune with Vedanta thinking, about which many people have talked today. So this whole thing is a united field. This is how Ayurveda describes the life process. Next one. Now a word about Swasthya. Susu Samhita, which is the next classic text of Ayurveda, describes Swasthya again as a four-dimensional entity, because life is four-dimensional, Therefore, swasthya has also to be four-dimensional. Most of you know, samadosha, samagnischa, samadhatu, malakriya. Prasannatmendriya manah swastitya vidhiyate. Who is healthy or swastha? Only he is healthy whose doshas, dhatus, agnis and malas are in a state of balance. In other words, only he is healthy whose all biological functions are in balance, equilibrium. But that alone is not healthy. That is not this full health. The full health is prasannatmendriya manaha. The individual should be biologically balanced, and he has to be in a state of bliss in terms of the senses, the soul, and the psyche. Then only he is healthy. So this makes a kind of four-dimensional definition of health: physical, mental, spiritual, and social. I'm quoting these two lines from Sushruta, particularly to emphasize that the latest definition of health in modern medicine is exactly the same. Modern medicine, WHO approved definition says that health is a state of physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being. Exactly same thing is Sushruta is saying so many years ago, 3,000 years ago. Now this is the testimony of the fact that probably most of the things which are talked about in our ancient sciences are modern, contemporary, and they are true. They have to be believed and developed and revived further. Let me say that the four definitions of health in modern medicine evolved over 200 years. They took 200 years to evolve. First, they say that health is a state of absence of disease. Well, this is a very negative definition. Then they started saying that no, it is not absence of disease, it is a state of well-being. After some decades, they say no, well-being is very vague. What kind of well-being we are talking? They said health is a state of physical well-being. For many years, the definition was that health is a state of physical well-being, as if we had only body, nothing else. And much later, they started saying that no, health is a state of physical and mental well-being, both two-dimensional. And further later, I remember in the year 1956, when I was a student, third dimension was added. The WHO said no, health is a state of physical, mental, and social well-being. Social well-being was added in 55, 56, and it was a big change in the thinking about medicine. World over, thinking that doctors are now think of society also. They are not talking only of individuals. Historically, very important decision which was taken. And during last few years, you hear about the fourth word, spiritual well-being. Although it is controversial, but Ayurveda says that the WHO says that health is a state of physical, mental, social, and also spiritual well-being. So imagine what Sushruta said in 600 BC is being said by WHO now. Means what we are standing on a sound ground and we have to work for it. The days are gone that nobody believed in these things, but whole world is believing in these things. Next one. Now Ayurveda from the very beginning, starting from the classic period, Charak, Sushruta, Bhagavad, Ayurveda was practiced in a little specialized way. There are 8 branches of Ayurveda. This is why we call it Ashtanga Ayurveda. The 8 specialities, equivalent to Indian internal medicine, surgery, ophthalmology, pediatrics, toxicology, rejuvenation, sexology, and psychiatry, like this. These are the classical words, Kaya Chikitsa, Sala Tantra Prasad, and so on. You all know. This is again an important fact to quote everywhere, that even 3,000 years back, Ayurveda was proceeding towards specialized practice. Modern medicine has started developing specialized medicine only during last 60, 70 years. Till that, there is no specialization. They are growing very fast. They are very fast in everything. Therefore, they are growing fast. But see that these specialized 8 major branches of medicine were practiced in the period of Charak. This again shows that we are still in a big way. Now, most of the Ayurvedic colleges have departments of all these 8. In addition, there are 8 more. In my faculty where I work, there are 16 departments. These 8 plus 8 more. So things are growing in this direction. So the trend of specialization started in 600 BC. Next one. Now, what is very special about the Ayurvedic diagnostics? Our students know. Ayurveda talks of Roga Pariksha, Rogi Pariksha. Twofold examination. When I examine a patient, I don't examine only his disease. I examine my patient for his health also. Examining the health of the patient. This is unique with Ayurveda. Modern medicine, nobody examines the health. They examine only the disease. When we examine the Rogi, we forget the disease, what he has. We devote some time to understand what is my patient, what is his temperament, what is the prakriti, how much health has remained behind in spite of being sick. This is called Rogi Pariksha. This is a unique feature of Ayurveda. No other system of medicine in the world talks of this. And this is the unique contribution which can be the contribution to modern medicine also. And then we examine the roga, the disease, for, as any doctor will do. So this twofold examination of the patient, making the diagnosis, is very special contribution of Ayurveda, which needs to be revived and developed and popularized today. Another thing which I want to point out, particularly to our younger generation coming from Ayurveda, the method of examining a patient, which is prevalent today in modern medicine, is the same what was prevalent in the period of Samhitas. We had classically, starting from Charak to Sushrut, the basic method of examination was Prashna Pariksha, Panchendriya Pariksha. Interrogate the patient and examine the patient physically. Now talk to any modern doctor, what do you do while examining the patient? He also interrogates, asks questions, and then he physically examines. Same thing was done here also, interrogating the patient and then examining him physically. So there has not been a fundamental change in the very approach of clinical medicine in modern medicine, except technology. Technology has grown so well. We should appreciate anything going good anywhere. But there has not been a breakthrough in the approach of knowledge. This is about the unique features of diagnostics in Ayurveda. Next one. Then when we proceed to treat, what do we do? What are the principles of treatment? This is again unique, very different than modern medicine. Now look at the first principle of treatment of a disease in Ayurveda is Nidana Parivarjan. Nidana Parivarjan means elimination of the cause. Try to know the cause, remove the cause, and there's no need of anything to be done. You remove the cause, patient will heal himself. There's no need of medicine, there's no need of a doctor to come. Remove the cause, but you have to know the cause. What is the cause? Usually doctors, including us, we don't know the cause. So there has to be intensive examination of the patient to understand why this patient has become sick. And remove the cause, leave the patient, he will heal himself because nature is already healing him. There is no need of waiting for a doctor to come to heal him. Now if somehow the disease has settled in the body, you have not done the Nidana Parivarjan, then what do? Then we go for Samprapti Bigatan. Look here to the words. Ayurveda is perfect in using words. Samprapti Bigatan. Samprapti means process of disease. He's not saying that I'm going to cure. He says Bigatan. Disease is to be reversed. It's no question of curing and not curing. Reversing the disease process. And how do we reverse the process? There are two broad methods of reversing the process. Number one is Samsodhan Chikitsa, and number two is Sansaman Chikitsa. Purify the body, because Ayurveda believes that our body is made of innumerable channels. and it is the channels through which the energy, the nutrition, the medication, everything flows. Now, if the channels of the body, what we call it srotas. When the srotas is blocked, nothing will work. So, first principle of reversing the disease is to purify the body, for which Panchakarma therapy became popular. Panchakarma therapy is basically needed to purify the body. When I say purifying the body, not purifying from the outside, purifying every cell of the body. I usually give the example, when you are putting your patient to emesis, vomiting for purifying the body, it is not only the stomach which is vomiting, every cell of the body is vomiting. Every cell is getting cleansed and cured. When you do this, the body biology is clean and is ready to heal. And then when you have cleansed and cleaned, then you go for some summon therapy, biobalancing. Then you use lifestyle management, food management, some medications to see that the imbalance which has occurred during the process of illness is rectified and go to equilibrium. Now, these are the principles. And the last three which I wrote, lifestyle management, plant dietetics, and plant medication. Oshadhi, Anna Vihara, Abhyam. These three, all three are to be done. If an Ayurvedic practitioner is just in fancy of prescribing few pills and sending the patient back home, he is not doing Ayurvedic practice. You are supposed to give more and more time to your patient, much more than the allopathic doctors, to understand the problems and then advise him a positive lifestyle. Unless you correct the lifestyle, our Excellency Governor said so nicely, lifestyle management, then planning the diet, and then if needed, few medicines. If not needed, don't give medicines. The whole power of medications has come on our head because of the pressure of industry. Industry wants to produce medicines, and they want to force our clinicians to prescribe, and the clinicians force our patients to swallow. It is all business, it is all industry which is playing havoc in our society. You have to be more systematic, more positive, more simple for this purpose. So this is how we do the treatment. Next one. Next, please. I'm not going to talk about Panchakarma. Panchakarma is a very, very elaborate subject in Ayurveda. There are experts sitting here, particularly I see two persons who are practicing good Panchakarma in Karnataka. It's a very big subject. The basic idea of Panchakarma is to purify the body from gross to subtle, so that every channel is cleaned, every cell is cleaned. Unfortunately, many people practice Ayurveda in the terms of massage. Simple massaging body is not Panchakarma. Panchakarma has to be in a way that the effect goes up to every cell. It also purifies every cell membrane so that the system is clean. I will not go into detail, but this is a very important component of Ayurvedic treatment. Next one. Now, friends, beside all this, I'll take some more time to talk to you that I claimed in the beginning that Ayurveda has its own materia medica. It has own medications also. Materia medica. And it has, many of our clients have faith. People believe that anything which is green is healthy. Anything which is red is unhealthy. I consider modern pharmacy as green pharmacy, red pharmacy. Our pharmacy is green pharmacy. Green pharmacy word is being used all over the world because green attracts you, heals you. And the moment you talk of chemicals and surgery, it is all red pharmacy. It is frightening, and mentally you are afraid of that. So this is our strength. Next one. I will give you some small examples because the Honorable Union Minister here was talking of modern Ayurveda. Yes, everything needs modernization because society is modern, therefore there is a need of modernization. I will give you some few examples that Ayurveda has also modern potential. Here is a slide, I hope you cannot see from here. few plants are given. Arjun, very famous plant, which is used for cardioprotection. Then ashwagandha is another plant, which is a rashayan, is a Vrishya, is a longevity producing drug. It's very, very popular in India, becoming more popular in United States and Europe. Many people have started calling it Indian ginseng. Ginseng, you hope. Ginseng is a Chinese herb, which has become very popular, and China is earning a lot of revenue from products of ginseng. And there are comparative studies to show that our ashwagandha is twice more effective than Chinese ginseng. But still, Chinese ginseng is sold in Indian market. Not so much ashwagandha, because of unawareness, because of faith of the people in our own things. Now, you will see this table. This was a small experiment that one of my students did at Banaras University, testing the longevity effect. If somebody uses ashwagandha for 1 year, whether the effects of aging are reduced. Testing the whole thing in terms of the biological aging, also in terms of the memory, if it improves, and then the third column is the mental health. Mental health, memory, and biological scale. And you'll see that figures, if visible to you, that in all these three parameters, after consumption of ashwagandha for 1 year, the elderly people who were under trial showed significant effect. So there is scientific evidence that these medicines can work also on modern parameters. So we can call it, this is modern Ayurveda. Next one. These are few other important, let me mention that our classics describe around 2,000 such very active medicinal plants. Many of them are not in use. Researchers are only on few. I'm giving only the examples to you. Few drugs, most of the drugs which are predicted here, they reduce blood sugar. They are used for treatment of diabetes. I give you a trial report. Next one. Well, this is a small, again, a clinical experiment done in my department a year back, where a medicine, it was coded earlier, now it is no more coded, I have written coded. It was Nisha Amalaki. Nisha Amalaki is a formulation, is a mixture of haldi and amalaki. Very simple formulation, very cheap and very simple. Both medicines are very safe. They are almost a part of the food. If these are used, there is a noticeable effect on the blood sugar level. The figures are shown here. When it was used as a single drug in many patients, those who were newly detected, we used single drug. There are many patients who are already under modern treatment, still not controlled. Then we added our treatment and we noticed the effect. And then there is a last column is the control where no treatment was given. And you will see that even there is a drug failure of a patient under care of a allopathic doctor, if he added these, there's a possibility that it can be controlled as an adjunct treatment. But all those mild to moderate patients who have been detected first, best treatment is to go for Ayurvedic treatment, and the results are significant. Next one. These are few drugs which are often used in women's health. We have large proportion of population is women whose health is not really satisfactory. For example, the Ashoka, the aloe vera, and few other things, Shatavari. These are popularly used in women for their health, promoting health, lactating mothers, pregnant mothers, and also for many things. And they are very useful, very safe. And the beauty is that most of these medications are food-like. They are not toxic drugs. They are food-like materials which can be of great help. Next one. Here are a few drugs. Everybody knows them. Brahmi, Shankapushpi, then Mandukapani, then Bilwa, ginseng again. The last, second line last is ginseng from China. Now all these drugs have effect on the brain function. Most of them are Medhya Rasayan. We call them Medhya Rasayan. Any remedy which is good for brain and mind is called Medhya. And they are all Rasayan. Rasayan means rejuvenators. Probably rejuvenators are nutrients-like things. They are not chemicals. Most of them are nutrients. They provide nutrition to your brain cells, improve the health. Next one, I show you some results. Here, you can see here the observations on mental effect of some of drugs. Let me. The first column is on Brahmi, and we have measured the memory span of patients who used it, and then we also measured the mental fatigue rate. When you are doing mental work, you get fatigued for some time. Now, those people who use it, the mental fatigue rate is reduced. You can do more mental work. Those who work in the office, or those who are scientists using a lot of time in mental work, mental fatigue rate is reduced and memory span is improved. The last column is a small experiment that we did on Manduk Pandi. Centella asiatica is another herb which is claimed to be a remedy for mental retardation. Now, this is a trial which was done on educable mentally retarded children, and we noticed an improvement in the performance quotient of the children. This is again a kind of Rasayan, rejuvenates brain. It is also known to improve the blood circulation in the brain, and the children improve their behavior. So this is Centella asiatica. There are many, many products in the market on these two products, mentally. Next one. Well, this is another important. I will not show you many slides. I'm just giving a few examples. This is Kapikachu, Kewach, Mucuna pruriens. It's a climber. It has legumes, and legumes are also used as vegetables. And it has seeds. Seeds are very rich in proteins. And the seeds are now known by scientific study that these seeds contain L-dopa. Therefore, many physicians are now using Kapikachu as treatment of Parkinson's disease. But I'm using this medicine as treatment of depression, particularly in elderly people. After 60 years of age, many people have some degree of depression. If the mood is elevated, they are very happy. And this is not really a chemical mood elevator. It's a Bajikaran, in fact. It's described in Ayurveda as Bajikaran. Many patients use it as a sex stimulant. But I don't think that. I think more that it is a kind of rejuvenator of the system which keeps your mood elevated. So if somebody has mild to moderate depressive illness, this medicine works better. There is a result of clinical trial. There is a controlled clinical trial done again at BHU in different kinds of depressive patients. And you will see here that the rate of depression has been measured by Hamilton rating scale for depression, and there is a significant improvement in the mood of these patients. Next one. Now, in view of such, there are many studies. I gave you some examples just to reflect that there is a possibility of evaluating the efficacy of these medicines also in modern way, about which the minister was asking that it has to be modernized. But it is not only modernization. There's also a need of studying this whole subject in an Ayurvedic way. It's not necessary because, unfortunately, Ayurveda has not much effective reproducible technology at present. And therefore, probably you have to borrow the technology from modern knowledge. There's no harm in borrowing the technology. Wisdom will be ours, science will be ours, but technology to test your vision may come from outside also, and nobody should object it. So, I hope you can see the picture of this man. This is Raghunath Mashelkar, who was the Director General of CSIR, he was very fond of green pharmacy. He once said that what is happening all over the world is a kind of, he said that the world is turning green. World is turning green means people are attracted to green resource. And it is going to be a kind of green revolution in India, medicinal green revolution of India. He was one pushing this movement. So, medicinal green revolution, Oshadhi Harit Kranti, this was the slogan that he used to give, and very relevant slogan that has to be done. Next one. Now, I will take maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes to use, just to bring to your notice the present status of Ayurveda. What is happening? Okay, I'll take 10 minutes and then I stop. Now, in the morning, it was said that we have an independent Ayush ministry in the government of India, and there's huge infrastructure already available in Ayurveda all over the country, although it has to be made stronger. And what is more important is to mention that recently the government of India has announced a National Ayush Mission. The National Ayush Mission, particularly by the inspirations of the Prime Minister, the National Ayush Mission is hitting towards using the resource for the welfare of the people, where there's a need of scientific interaction. Next one. This is the infrastructure available. We have more than 250 Ayurvedic colleges all over the country. There are 60 institutions where we give postgraduate education. We also conduct research. There are 4 independent universities of Ayurveda. I hope you know, there are 4 universities, state universities are there. They are doing a lot of work and education. And there are 4 national institutes now. Main job is postgraduate education and research. We have more than 4.5 lakhs of registered practitioners. We have 15,000 dispensaries. We have 3,000 hospitals, provided with 60,000 beds in the hospitals. So a lot of things are there. It is not that we are poor. We are not poor. We are poor in our mentality. We are poor in using the facilities. Facilities are there and they are not being used. A lot of things are there. Therefore, and recently, when a few years ago, the National Rural Health Mission was started. Now, gradually it is being correlated and co-located in our sector. For example, about 250 districts, there is already a National Rural Health Mission activity going on. And as many as 1,700 CSCs and more than how many? 8,000 PSCs have programs of National Rural Health Mission. So everything is happening in a big way. There's a need of realizing, the need of making people know that things are happening. Many of our people are disappointed. They think that nothing is happening. I feel that a lot of things are being done and there's a need of support of everybody. Next one. Okay, next one. Next one. Friends, because I have shortage of time, let me say a resurgence of interest in Ayurveda. Why there is a resurgence of interest in Ayurveda? Why politicians are talking about it? Why bureaucrats are talking? Why foreigners are talking? The main attraction of Ayurveda is the unique fundamental principles. Ayurveda is working on basic fundamental principles, which are very special, very different than modern medicine. This is the attraction. And then our medicines are soft and cost-effective. Our green pharmacy is attraction. And at the same time, regional popularity is also that modern medicine is facing a problem. I have given a picture here of a book recently published by an American, very senior medical man, The Rise and Fall of Modern Medicine. Modern medicine grew, now it is declining. If facing a statue, There's the rise and fall. And when there is a fall, our sector should try to fill up the gap. And this is one thing which is important. The trend is changing. Trend is changing because of your unique nature, and also because modern medicine is not really successful now. It is very not cost effective, it's very unsafe. Next one. I'm quoting here the Planning Commission of India. Planning Commission of India last year said very strongly, now Planning Commission is being changed, that there's a need of promoting medical pluralism in this country, medical pluralism. No one single system of medicine is enough to take care of everybody's health care. Every system has a power, and all systems have to be promoted to grow in their own way and to help the situation. This is called medical pluralism. Even America is playing for medical pluralism. 20 years ago, it was unisystem. Now it is pluralism to be promoted. Next one. Now this is one a book which I published recently along with one of my colleagues by Springer in Germany, which talks of evidence. In the morning session also it was pointed out that Ayurveda has to have evidence. What is the evidence that you are really good? Now evidence is what? It has to be defined. We have evidence of two kinds. Primary evidence is that we have a Shastra which is very strong, believable, very logical. This is called scriptural evidence. Then there is a huge evidence based on experience. There are many people who have experience of certain things. That is also evidence. This is called primary evidence. But WHO says, and I also agree, that the primary evidence of Shastra and experience is to be supported by new scientific evidence. This is called the evidence. So evidence has to be addressed from a new angle, and that is being done. Next one. And this is the kind of research that we are doing. Literary and conceptual research, clinical and therapeutic research, drug research in terms of drug standardization of what we are doing. Whatever drugs we are using are to be standardized. That is immediate need. And then there can be an effort of developing new drugs out of Ayurveda research. This is the kind of spectrum which is in operation. Next one. I don't think that I should speak about yoga, but there is, I refer, I'll take only 2 more minutes. What Swamiji was mentioning, somebody was talking about Ashtanga Yoga. Well, yoga is not really a science of medicine. Ayurveda is more a science of spirituality, and at most is the science of promotion of health. But the research done in recent years have shown that probably practice of yoga could be an effective complement to Ayurvedic treatment. And therefore it is very useful to join hands. Ayurveda and yoga put together can be of greater impact than the two working separately. Till now we are working separately. But there's a need of joining hands so that it can be a benefit. Next one. Okay, these are just symbolically shown, some postures. Next. Yes, here is a data, small data. I have 2 more slides to show you. This is an experiment that I did in my university on university students as volunteers. They were healthy. And they were given a training of practice of yoga for 6 months. And the results show here that this practice induces a significant increase in the vital capacity of the individuals. Their respiratory functions improve, their memory is better and sharper, their performance quotient is better, and overall health index indicates every normal person has also some complaints. When you score the complaints and give the treatment, after treatment you measure again the complaints are less, means people feel better with this. Next one. And here I am quoting a study which was published from UK, A very simple study, such studies are very useful. This not a new study, old study. A large number of patients suffering from different diseases which are not curable. A survey was done to ask them, do you practice yoga? A question, yes or no. And if you practice, are you benefited? These are the two questions. Do you practice yoga? If you practice, are you benefited? And the reply shows very significant. So many people, 70 to 80% people practice yoga in Britain, and more than 70% of them said, I am benefited, therefore I practice. This is not the assessment of a doctor or a scientist. This is assessment of the consumers in the society. Therefore, this is very realistic data. So, yoga is already established as a system of healthcare. Ayurveda is trying to create its space, even now, but yoga has already found its place. Wherever you go, yoga is accepted scientifically, socially. Ayurveda is still trying hard. Why it is trying hard? Because Ayurveda does not use only postures, it uses also medicines. And for that, there is a need of regulation, there is a need of law. And because of that, our progress is slow. Next one. So this is what I'm concluding here, how yoga improves the improvement. What is the mechanism of action of yoga? Why a person practicing yoga feels good? Few things are important. I don't know, you cannot see, therefore I read for you. There's postural correction and exercise effect. There's neuromuscular coordination, vascular and hemodynamic corrections, anti-stress and relaxation effects, biopurification effect, neuroendocrine effect, energy modulation, immunostabilization, metabolic corrections, cognitive ability, emotional stability, and also longevity. Now, all these things, there are evidences to suggest that those who practice yoga, they have such benefits. And therefore, next one. Therefore, I believe that Ayurveda and yoga have a strong primary evidence in terms of the Shastra, in terms of the experience of the people, and has also growing robust scientific evidence of today. And therefore, let us believe that we can help these sciences to grow for the welfare of the people. So, next one. This is, I'm quoting here, I'm very fond of quoting these few lines from a book on history of medicine. This was a book written by history of medicine, modern medicine, every medicine, not Ayurvedic medicine, written by Welch in '68. Now this book on the very first page writes these few lines, and the lines are again very gratifying to know. I think I should read again these few lines. This is the last slide. This author says, in spite of the fact that the ancient Hindu medicine practice in India in the earliest times was an equally developed scientific discipline as any other contemporary system in the world, its influence on the Western society was small. Hence, most of the current writings on history of medicine do not have appropriate mention of the contributions of ancient Indian medicine. Now, he says that in his assessment, Ayurvedic sciences, ancient Ayurvedic sciences, were equally scientific as any other science in the world. Still, it could not create an impact on the Western mind, and therefore you do not find mention of these systems in their literature. How it happened? Probably happened because we were not an independent country for a long time. We were slaves. Later also, the atmosphere was not favorable. And more than that, probably, we are very shy in talking about our own self. Indians are not very vocal. They are very shy. They talk a little about themselves. And because of that, what impact we could have created could not be created. But friends, now there's a need that we do not need to be shy. We need to be loud to talk about ourselves, our nation, and our sciences, so that it has a global impact, because at the present time, probably important is only that which is agreed upon by everybody. Unless Ayurveda and Yoga is globalized, people will not consider it a science. Science is a global phenomena. If it is limited only in India, it is not a science. Religion can be local, culture may be local, but science has to be global. And for making it global, probably interactions are more important. Next one. Okay, thank you very much. Local. Culture may be local, but science has to be global. And for making it global, probably interactions are more important. Next one. Okay, thank you very much.